You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Earlier this week, Enniscorthy Chamber ran a seminar entitled 5 Years On, Getting Ready for Sustainable Growth in County Wexford in association with Hughes Blake Chartered Accountants. After the event, I had the opportunity of speaking to their managing partner, Neil Hughes. I started by asking Neil what prompted him to organise this event.
Well, I suppose it's a sense that we have in the firm, Karl, that we are at a turning point now in 2013, the summer of 2013, and I say that for a number of reasons. What we're seeing out there, I suppose, at the coalface in amongst the clients we're dealing with, we are seeing a bit of confidence returning in relation to business matters. But the specific things that I suppose we were looking at is we've recently seen an increase in consumer discretionary spending, whereby we've got the behaviour and attitude survey of 1,000 adults carried out on a regular basis is showing for the first time in 5 years, it's showing an increase in discretionary consumer spending. And that's of about 10 to 15%. And that's just within the last, I suppose, few weeks or last couple of months that's happened. So that's the first thing, which is very positive for any business that depends on consumer spending, which is pretty much every business, Karl, really. But secondly then, we've seen predictions now that ECB interest rates are going to remain low at their current rate of 0.5% or lower than that for the next, say, 5 years or so. That there's a low interest environment ahead of us now for a sustained period. We're looking at the good news, the fact that government debt is now maxing out this year and hopefully will start to decrease every year, which means we're going to have less austerity budgets going forward. And less austerity budgets hopefully will mean more budgets that are focused on unemployment. And unemployment is also coming down on a national basis from a high of 15.1% in February of last year down to its current level of 13.6%. So it's down 1.5%. So, and I suppose I could talk to you about house prices going back up now nationally. It's being led by Dublin, obviously, but it was always going to be led by Dublin. I could talk to you about business sentiment increasing. But overall, the macro factors we're looking at are all pointing in the right direction.
You hit the nail on the head, the macro factors. Unfortunately, I would say that Wexford is probably one of the last places to see the upturn based on those macro factors. As you said, Dublin yourself is seeing the growth in relation to the house prices. I would say as well that Dublin is probably seeing the growth in relation to consumer spending and everything else as well across the pond.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. Our difficulty in County Wexford is that we are the region of the country that has suffered most in the recession, and unemployment increased from full employment of about 4% to a rate of 18% currently, which is, about 5% above the national average. So we are starting behind everybody else. So if we want businesses, local businesses here in Enniscorthy and around the county to catch this upswing, we have a challenge because we're starting from behind everywhere else. We were also looking this evening about the fact that the social welfare offices in County Wexford are the busiest in the country. Ourselves and Donegal are the two counties that have the busiest social welfare offices, which is another sign something hasn't been picked up really in the media, which focuses just on unemployment. But the actual numbers coming through the doors of the social welfare offices is a real challenge. So yes, we do have a challenge. There's no point in saying otherwise. But feeling sorry for ourselves, Karl, is not a strategy that's going to get us out of the problem. And I suppose what we wanted to do this evening in association with the Chamber, we wanted to try and start looking at strategies to be proactive and positive about business in the county, about playing to our strengths. And we heard a lot about the tourism side of things. We heard a lot about the social media strategy, for example, that some of the local tourism agencies are employing. And I found that hugely inspiring, I've got to be honest with you. I thought it was very well done. And there's a number of other things, I suppose, that we were looking at this evening with a view to trying to encourage business in the town and to try and drive recovery, economic recovery for the county. And that's really what tonight was all about.
I suppose most of the business owners that are listening to this morning's show are probably sitting there in their cars this morning or in their businesses or homes this morning, and they're saying to themselves, this guy Neil Hughes, he's talking very positively, but we're not getting the effects of this ourselves in business. We're struggling to pay our bills. We've had to leave staff go. We're struggling to pay our commercial rates. We're being crippled with them. What would you say to business owners with that viewpoint? Yeah,
I mean, Karl, that's something I've heard before. I mean, I was accused last Monday on Alan's show on the Morning Mix of perhaps looking at things through rose-tinted glasses, is what one of the text messages read. And look, the reality is that I suppose, I'm not an economist. I'm just telling you what this is. These are freely available statistics about the kind of macro recovery that's there. But it's not happening as fast in County Wexford. And that's the challenge for us, is to make sure we don't get left behind in the upswing. And what I suppose I would say to people who are struggling, there are issues there whereby people may need to deal with unsustainable debt, both personal debt and business debt. That's something we discussed. We went through the new personal insolvency this evening as well. We went through we touched on restructuring for businesses that may have unsustainable bank debt, for example. We talked about what the different banks are doing. The fact that certain banks are writing amounts off. They literally are writing. Some of the foreign-owned banks, which are exiting the country, are actually writing debt off. And look, there is an issue there with the Irish pillar banks. They're not in that place at the minute. They're simply not there yet. They haven't got their mindset in the right place from the point of view of real sustainable debt. I'm talking particularly about the pillar banks, for example. So those are some of the challenges to allow the county move on and to allow people to get money back in their pockets so that they can go out spending again, so that we can keep that consumer spending going in the right direction.
If you were the county manager in Wexford, covering the county today, what would you be doing differently?
I thought there was a great suggestion this evening. It was a hot topic discussed this evening in relation to the barrier that businesses in local towns face by people being charged to drive into them and shop in their businesses. Whereas, for example, if you're on the outskirts of a town, you may have free parking. That seems completely unfair to me. It's not a level playing field. And I think it's tearing the heart out of towns. I think it's a kind of a Celtic Tiger thing came in, that you would charge somebody to come in and shop, that you would charge for parking at whatever the rates are. They're different in different towns, I know. But it's just a barrier, and we need to remove barriers where people are so value conscious. I think there'd be a huge amount more business. There may be an awful lot more traffic, which would have to be managed, and we'd have to think about that. But I think there'd be a lot more business if people could come in and park for free when they wanted to, not have the fear, not be running back to their car from the stores, that they can have a bit of a chance to leisurely enjoy a shopping experience in the towns of County Wexford. I think that would be the best thing that could be done.
That's one practical idea and strategy that could be applied very, very easily with the consent of the local authority. Give me another one.
I think we probably need to think in terms of a forum of some description to try and get people back into the empty, vacant stores around the county, in the towns around the county. Like, it breaks my heart I'm from Enniscorthy, and it breaks my heart to see boarded up shops. There's some areas of the town I could mention, I won't mention them, but there's some areas whereby really they're starting to look like they are streets that are withering on the vine. And I think there should be some sort of a forum whereby people are encouraged, with the cooperation of the landlords, with the cooperation of the councils, to actually come in, and they may be voluntary shops, they may be art galleries, they might be pop-up businesses, but some sort of a forum to match people with good ideas with premises in the town at nominal rents, because you're better off having somebody in there, even if there's, this is again to get people back into the towns. But people, if they want to pop up because they want to sell something they may have made at home, local produce, whatever it is, get them in and match them up with landlords who have a vacant unit, even on temporary short-term leases, quarter by quarter, 3 months, 6 months, get economic activity back into the towns. That'll be the second suggestion I'd make. Something
else that came up at tonight's meeting, and it comes up at almost every meeting that could ever be held about business across the whole country. It doesn't matter if you're in Cavan, Wexford, Cork or Dublin. Commercial rates is a serious issue. What do you think the solution to commercial rates is?
I think the solution to commercial rates is that there should be some central funding available for local services, in the same way as they are saying that the local property tax is going to go to local services. That funding is going to have to be replaced. We've already abolished, earlier in this interview, all parking in the county. So if we move on and say we're going to abolish all rates, like, the reality is the local services will close down. Okay, so we'll have to move that into the fact that the additional economic activity will result in more VAT being paid. That goes to central government. It'll result in more corporation tax being paid. That goes to central government as well. Income tax, from the point of view of new employees and PAYE, it all goes to central government. So central government is going to have to pay for the local services, not have it paid through rates. So there's some fundamental rethinking needed in relation to the way that we run this country in order to abolish rates. And it's the same principle, by the way, as reducing corporation tax from the 40% it was when I left college, I remember, down to 12.5% now. It's not taxing people trying to do business. You don't tax enterprise. It makes no sense to tax people who are trying to create employment. They're trying to drive entrepreneurship in the county. You don't tax that. You don't put barriers in the way. You get out of the way. You get those barriers out of the way. And that's, I suppose that would be our philosophy in Hughes Blake. It'd be a pro-business, it'd be a positive, proactive philosophy. And that's what we were talking about tonight.
Neil, I'd like to focus on your own business for a second. You've seen explosive growth in your own business, Hughes Blake Chartered Accountants, over the last 5 or 6 years. Tell us, back in 2005, 2006, 2007, how many did you employ then, and where are you at now, and how did you do it?
Yeah. Well, Karl, I wouldn't say it was explosive growth. I mean, I have to kind of steady on a bit on that one. It was, we certainly have seen some growth, and I suppose we have been fortunate that we had two sides to the business, whereby we were involved both in general practice as, business advisor to entrepreneurs, to family businesses, owner-managed businesses, but also we had our restructuring arm, which has been very busy over the last few years. With examinership cases particularly, which is about saving viable enterprises, including some examinerships in County Wexford, but right the way across the country. And that, I suppose, has led to some of our growth, but also there's new areas now for accountants to get into. And it's very rare, that you'd have, for example, a whole new sector like personal insolvency to get into. And I suppose I was talking to my father, Kevin, about this, he's the Hughes in Hughes Blake, Karl, as you know, and he was likening it to when, for example, farmers started paying tax back in the 70s. This was a whole new area for accountants to get into. And in the last few years, there has been also opportunities for accountants who can advise people who are struggling with personal debt, businesses that are struggling, and this is all new areas that you can get into. So I suppose our strategy was quite simple, that it was just unacceptable for us as a firm to turn somebody away that wanted advice in a particular sector. So it's for that reason that we went down the road of being a multidisciplinary firm, that we could help people both when they're in difficulty, but also when they're expanding, when they're looking to raise money for a new venture, where they're looking to drive their business forward. And that's been our strategy, I suppose, is to be a multidisciplinary, trusted business advisor for local businesses. And it's worked well for us, I have to say.
You're listening to South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.